Before we get any further, this video contains spoilers for The Bad Batch Season 2. If you haven't watched the episodes yet, we highly recommend you head on over to Disney Plus and watch them before continuing with the video. If you're all caught up, or just don't care, let's dive right in. Fans of Star Wars The Clone Wars all fondly remember the B1 series Battle Droids and their goofy antics. For every serious battle the Clone Wars gave us, we had countless more scenes where droids fumbled tactics, failed to react to a sudden attack with anything more than a funny quip, or just failed miserably. It was funny, and as we discussed in a recent video, secretly depressing. Last week's Bad Batch episode, however, showed us a droid army that was at its best. Instead of the goofy, awkward droids the Clone Wars gave us, we saw an army that relied on strategy, coordination, and precision. In today's video, we'll be talking about why the droids were able to perform so much better after the end of the Clone Wars, and why it's a step up for droid rights everywhere. In a recent video, we went into detail about the horrific conditions the CIS expected B1 battle droids to work under. After Bactoid gave them proper droid brains alongside their CCC transceivers, things went downhill pretty quickly for the B1s. Yes, they were now capable of functioning independently of a droid control ship, but their makers didn't just stop there. They saw an opportunity to cut costs in an already expensive war and use these droid brains to reprogram the battle droids for additional functions. That's why we see B1s doing things like piloting, maintenance work, operating gun turrets, and so on. These weren't part of their original programming, but were instead added as a sort of droid brain DLC to give them extra features. This was already a lot to ask of the battle droids' rudimentary droid brains, but things only got worse for them. It turns out that these new features were wiped every time the droids received maintenance, so the Separatists decided to save time by skipping routine defrag. The already overtaxed B1s now had a full RAM and millions of junk files bogging down their system, to use more modern terms. It was no wonder they underperformed so much during the Clone Wars. In literally the very first episode of the series, the B1 battle droids first failed to take down Jedi Master Yoda's ship as it was approaching the dried coral moon of Ragosa. Once planetside, the vast droid army under the command of Asajj Ventress struck a deal with Yoda. If the little Jedi and his troops could escape the droid army, the Toydarians would join the Republic. But if the droids won, the Toydarians would ally with the Separatists. Even with so much at stake, the droids displayed severe performance issues.
I think I see them. They're hiding deep in the trees. Fire on Sector 11.
At ease be, my friends. Within range, we are not.
Hold it. Hold it. I said hold it. Wait. That's far enough. I mean it. Stop. I said stop. We're too big to fit in there. No, we're not. Watch this. You were right. Next time, listen to orders.
As we saw, the droids displayed a complete lack of coordination. The B1 in charge was completely ignored when issuing orders. They seemed unaware of their enemies being out of range, and then made a complete miscalculation and drove one of their tanks into the coral. This sort of incompetence was commonplace during the Clone Wars and was something the Republic relied on heavily to win several key battles. After the Clone Wars ended, however, things seem to have changed. This is where episode 3 of the Bad Batch Season 2 comes in. In stark contrast to their epic fails during the Clone Wars, the Separatist droid army seen in Ep 3 is functioning as a cohesive tactical unit, the likes of which we rarely, if ever, saw during the Clone Wars. When Crosshair, Commander Cody, and the other clones arrived on Desix, it was up to the droid army to defend their planet from the Empire's invasion. Led by a tactical droid located in the Governor's Tower, the B1s performed surprisingly well. Their first success was taking down the clones' shuttle as it entered the atmosphere with anti-aircraft missiles. On the tactical droid's command, the airstrike team seamlessly got into position, with both ground forces and anti-aircraft vehicles taking their places. All of the droids are moving in sync and don't fumble. They aim perfectly when taking down the Imperial ship, make sure they have eyes on the enemy, and send intel back. Meanwhile, the tactical droid is able to monitor the entire battlefield from her vantage point, which also keeps her safe from the fighting on the front lines. When the B-1s are sent to explore the crashed ship and search for survivors, most of them stay outside the ship while only one goes inside. This is another smart move, even if it doesn't work out for the droids due to the clones' plot armor. The droids recover, however, and set up positions to block off the intruders. With their tank facing the direction and too much open space between the crash shuttle and them, Commander Cody comments that the clones can't approach without being picked off. When carrying out Crosshair's plan to take out the tank, the droids again react admirably well. They don't flinch at the first bolt of surprise fire, unlike what they would have done in the Clone Wars. Instead of panicking, they fluidly scan their surroundings, accurately pinpointing the source of fire and redirecting their efforts in that direction. Again, an admirable effort that might have worked if Crosshair wasn't a deus ex machina in this scenario. In fact, the B-1's entire response to the invading clones is tactically sound. They maintain the high ground, use ranged weapons, and avoid clustering together. It would have been an excellent response had it not been for Crosshair's sniper fire. Even he recognizes how coordinated they are.
They're moving in coordinated waves. There has to be a tactical droid giving them orders.
When the clones breach their perimeter, the tactical droid instructs the droid army to execute Protocol 4. This involves regular patrols and even the deployment of droidicas that nearly take the clones out. The droids utilize the different elevations in their surroundings to gain the upper hand and make it harder on the clones to respond, and in all fairness to them, this tactic would have worked on most forces. In the end, the clones were able to breach the Governor's Tower, take advantage of the cramped space to dispatch the commando droids there, and then take out the tactical droid. It was a clone victory, but in our opinion, that was mostly due to plot armor and a particularly veteran force. So, what changed? Why were the droids suddenly able to be so much more precise and strategic about their approach to combat after the Clone Wars? While we don't have any concrete answers, we can take a few educated guesses as to what made such a difference in the droid army's performance. To begin with, the droid army on Desix seems to be combining the best of both worlds to take the most advantage of the B-1 Battle Droid's capabilities. On the one hand, the tactical droid was in charge of coordinating all the ground forces, deciding on the strategy they would follow and directing the troops. This took considerable pressure off the Battle Droid's basic droid brains, as they could now focus on following orders instead of making their own calls at every turn, which never went well during the Clone Wars. The tactical droid also had a better grasp on the full situation thanks to the vantage point, so the commands fit the greater battle plan much better than what isolated B-1 units could have come up with. On the other hand, the B-1s weren't being remote controlled by a control ship anymore. They're still clearly in possession of their independence, as evidenced by their quips, high fives, and the fact that they continued to function after the tactical droid was dispatched. With the combination of a tactically superior commander in charge and use of their own faculties, the B-1 could finally operate at their best. In that sense, the droid army was functioning much like an organic one, with one tactician pulling the strings and independent soldiers following orders, but retaining their own freedom of thought to respond accordingly. As episode 4 showed us, droids are excellent, but can't really compare to organics in many ways, so mimicking a more traditional army helped the droids improve their performance. If we had to guess, we would also bet on the people of Desix actually performing maintenance on their B-1s. There are certainly droids with additional programming, but it seems to have been kept to a minimum, and most of the tasks we see them perform were part of their core functions. More free RAM, maintained drivers, and not that many junk files meant the B-1s were less stressed and overwhelmed, which resulted in better performance. Funny what better working conditions can do, even for droids. For one, we were very happy to see the B-1s finally getting a well-deserved break. After the miserable conditions they had to deal with during the Clone Wars, they more than earned some better working conditions. And also, a massive shout out to those epic commando droids and droidicas. To us, they seemed a lot more scary than they were in the Clone Wars. But let us know what you think. And also, let us know what you think of episode 4. We usually do these videos based on the episode that was just released, but we thought episode 4 was a little bit dry and we decided to make a video on episode 3 instead. Anyways guys, as always, thank you so much for watching and I hope to see you in the next video.